right, welcome to another episode of Piecing It Together, the podcast where we take a look at a new movie and try to figure out what movies inspired it. And today on the show, we are getting into Anora, the new film from Sean Baker starring Mikey Madison. And this has been one of the most talked about movies of the year. I could not let the year go by without covering this one. And joining me to talk about it, we've got returning to the podcast, Josie DeMarco, and we have a really fun conversation. Lots of great puzzle pieces to get into with this one. Before we get to it, I do want to remind you, as always, to make sure you are subscribed to Piecing It Together wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can follow us on social media, whether that's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky. It's at Piecing Pod, and you will find me and everything that I'm up to, everything that the podcast is up to. We got lots of episodes on the way, so make sure you are subscribed and following, so that way you'll find out about all that. And with that said, let's get into Anora. All right, we've got Josie DeMarco returning to the podcast to talk about Anora. How's it going, Josie?
It's going fantastic. I'm so glad to be here to talk about one of my favorites of the year. And what I love about Anora is that it's basically a mob movie told from the badass mob wife's point of view.
Yeah, I think that's that's a good way to put it for sure.
I am so obsessed with Mikey Madison and Yura Borisov's characters, Anora and Igor's relationship. They're so freaking cute. I love how he goes out of his way to protect her. It's so sweet.
Yeah, it's funny as this movie unfolds, like, you kind of see that things might head in that direction, and slowly but surely they do, and it's really sweet the way that, things kind of end up, even though there's a lot of darkness to it, there's a lot of,
Yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
anxious energy to everything going on, but in that ending and in everything that we, like, kinda build to, you really kinda want those 2 to kinda find something.
It's funny. On Twitter, some people have said about them and like memes people made. Someone did a meme of 2 people crying and then
Mhm.
saying, thinking about when Anora got on top of Igor because she obviously was not okay and thought that was what Igor wanted because all she been was an object to people. And when she realizes he's actually there for her, she gets to cry knowing she's being cared about. And in the GIF, there's 2 people crying and like leaning together, smiling. And then
Aw.
I know it's like one of those on screen things that like makes your heart flutter.
Yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
the movie also has some thought provoking things to say about class and privilege, and oligarchs basically running the country. And who's to say that there aren't a bunch of there aren't Ivans walking around right now?
No,
Who
absolutely,
is
and
he is such a piece of shit.
totally, totally, and that's some of my, like, favorite parts about this movie. As we start getting into the puzzle pieces here, it'll come up plenty, but the idea of these people who just can do anything, and, the effects of any situation does not matter whatsoever to them. It matters to everybody else in their orbit, but to them, they can just get away with whatever the hell they want, and,
Yeah.
I think this movie kinda shines a light on that very well, but, with that said, we should start getting into some puzzle pieces. What do you have for your first one?
All right. So, while on the topic of mobsters, my first puzzle piece is the 1988 comedy classic directed by Jonathan Demme, Married to the Mob.
Sure.
So, Angela DeMarco, played by Michelle Pfeiffer, and she has the same last name as me, has had enough of her marriage to mafia gangster husband Frank, aka the Cucumber, played by Alec Baldwin. She just can't take it anymore. She requests a divorce, but she's dismissed. Then, after Alec Baldwin's killed, she decides to begin a new life with her son in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Tony, aka the Tiger Russo, played by Dean Stockwell, the don of her husband's mafia group, always had a thing for Angela, and he tries to harass her for romantic affections. Tony's wife Connie, played by Mercedes Ruehl, is actually convinced that Michelle Pfeiffer is having an affair with Dean Stockwell, so she has her eye on her. And then so Michelle Pfeiffer gets her own salon, and then under the impression that Michelle Pfeiffer is actually Dean Stockwell's character's mistress, 2 FBI agents played by named Mike Downey and Ed Benitez, played by Matthew Modine and Oliver Platt, investigate the situation so they can bust the tiger. Matthew Modine poses as Michelle Pfeiffer's neighbor, and they start genuinely liking each other, and then they start to fall in love, and then inevitably more hijinks ensue. And as Dean Stockwell tries to take Michelle Pfeiffer's character for himself, Mercedes Ruehl goes totally crazy, and it's hysterical. This movie is super fun. It's such a gem.
I have to rewatch it. I haven't seen it since like way back in the 90s. And I remember it being a lot of fun. I'm glad you brought it up because that's a really great one. And yeah, I mean, there's a great like history of these kinds of like mob comedies and like things where like the gangsters are just like totally ridiculous and threatening at the same time, and that kind of like there's a lot of room for comedy when something like that gets kind of mashed together. And I've got one that kind of goes along with that coming up a little bit later, but the first one that I'm going to bring up, actually going back to the idea of these rich entitled people who get to basically do whatever the hell they want, and everyone else in their orbit just has to kind of live with those consequences. I was thinking of Get Him to the Greek with Russell Brand, who we don't really want to talk about Russell Brand too much nowadays.
we brought up Russia basically running the country already, so
yeah, exactly.
This isn't Pod Save America.
Yeah, true. We don't have to go too deep into that, but yeah, I mean, I think that is another movie though where everybody in the orbit of these main characters just their lives are just kind of thrown to shit, but that main guy is going to be perfectly fine. Ivan is going to go off. He's going to live his rich, spoiled, entitled life, and he's not going to have any issues. Whereas, we hope that things work out well for Annie in the long run. We don't really know for sure. Maybe her and Ivan maybe have something like you were talking about. But, we hope, though, that everybody else is okay.
Oh, you mean Igor. They're both Russian names.
Yes,
anyway,
yes, right.
So,
yeah.
My next piece, while on the note of crime comedies, I actually have not seen Get Him to the Greek in full, but I know that in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, the character of Russell Brand is like he is of course famous, rich, and entitled at the hotel, and but there is a human side to him, though he and there's also entitlement on the fan base of with Jonah Hill's part, because he's basically like an entitled fan, like, oh my god.
Yeah. By the way, that movie is just cursed at this point. Jonah Hill, Russell Brand, Puff Daddy. I probably shouldn't even bring it up on this podcast.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
All those people that we don't want to talk about.
I've heard Jonah Hill's a piece of shit too.
Yeah, exactly. But I felt it fit. But what's next?
All right. Another crime comedy. I'm going to talk about Home Fries from 1998, directed by Dean Parasot, if I'm pronouncing his name right, who also directed Galaxy Quest.
Right, yeah.
All right, this screenplay was actually written by Vince Gilligan. All right, this is a very weird movie, but it's actually pretty fun, pretty entertaining. So Darian and Angus Montier, played by Luke Wilson and Jake Busey, their stepfather has a young pregnant mistress named Sally, played by Drew Barrymore. And when the film starts, we see their father Henry telling Drew Barrymore's character that his wife Dorian and Angus's mother, played by Catherine O'Hara, she knows about their affair. And she has, in fact, ordered her sons to track him down and shoot him. He's encountered by the Cobra attack helicopter, driven by his stepsons. He escapes into a wooded area, and then Luke Wilson and Jake Busey don't shoot him dead, but his fear from the gunshots caused him to die from a heart attack. Then Luke Wilson's character does an investigation into Drew Barrymore's character at the fast food joint, and he begins to fall in love with her. And then Catherine O'Hara, of course, wants Sally killed, and Drew Barrymore feels, who plays Sally, she's unsure about Dorian being a father figure to a child who's also his, not brother by blood, but stepbrother. Still awkward. It's a very weird movie, but yet I can't help but be entranced by the ridiculousness with the crime stuff, and the relationship between Luke Wilson and Drew Barrymore that should be icky on paper is surprisingly sweet.
I've actually never seen it. I'm gonna have to check it out. It's got such a great cast, and I obviously love Galaxy Quest.
And written by Vince Gilligan, creator of
Eh,
Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul.
yeah, that's crazy. That is such a random project, like with all those people and the director of Galaxy Quest for Vince Gilligan to be a part of that. That is a very interesting. I gotta go back and watch that one for sure.
Yeah, and it's kind of like with Anora, like they're on paper, kind of like the connection Igor and Anora form should be icky because it's his basically his like boss's sort of ex-wife.
Yeah,
uh, it should be icky, but it somehow is sweet. Kind of like, well, on paper, the Luke Wilson, Drew Barrymore thing is a little ickier, but it somehow is executed sweetly.
sure. Well, I am gonna go. We're talking about these kind of silly gangster movies. I'm gonna go with Ghost Dog, the Jim Jarmusch film.
I haven't seen that, but I really want to.
It's so much fun, and the most fun of the movie is the fact that all of these gangsters that Ghost Dog gets himself in a kind of whole heated situation with, they're just so bumbling and so ridiculous, and at times even cartoonish in a way. And some of the
Kind of
most
like the gangsters here.
exactly. Some of the most fun stuff in Anora is these gangsters just tripping over themselves trying to hold back Mikey Madison's character, and she just is too much for them, and it is just so much fun to watch. And this is, I think, this movie's, I feel like everybody who sees it loves Anora, but I feel like a big part of that is these kind of interactions between her and these gangsters as they try to keep her kidnapped in the house and waiting for the big boss. And it's just ridiculous. Like they just cannot stop her whatsoever, and they're just so futile, their efforts to try to like stop her
I
in
know,
any
and
way.
I love Yura Borisov's character Igor. Like, even though like she has such a sharp tongue, he's like he kind of likes
Yeah,
her insults.
I think he's intrigued by her.
Hmm. Sure
Yeah,
is.
I love all that. What do you got for your next piece?
All right, my next piece is I'm going to go with a screwball comedy from 1941 called Ball of Fire, directed by Howard Hawks. The
Okay.
film begins with a group of college professors trying to write an encyclopedia. Professor Berman Potts, played by Gary Cooper, has a goal of developing a deeper understanding of contemporary slang and lingo. And in order to do that, he visits a nightclub where he meets a burlesque singer named Sugarpuss O'Shea, played by Barbara Stanwyck. They're immediately smitten, and little does Professor Potts know that Sugarpuss
That's a tough one.
is engaged to a mobster that the police are searching for. And Barbara
Mm.
Stanwyck's character bonds with Gary Cooper's character and the rest of the professors in sort of a Snow White and Seven Dwarfs kind of fashion. This movie is such a delight.
I have not seen that one. There's so many Howard Hawks films that I have never seen, and I need to go back and watch.
Yeah,
It sounds like a lot of fun.
it's a good one.
So I'm gonna go for my next one. I'm gonna go with a movie I just saw for the first time this year. Finishing up my Bob Fosse marathon for the other podcast I do, Awesome Movie Year. We're doing 1969, and we did an episode on Sweet Charity. And I feel like that movie is probably a pretty big influence here on everything that Sean Baker and Mikey Madison were aiming for. While this isn't a musical, Shirley MacLaine's character is a dancer and dreams of falling in love. And even in the face of all of these like endless bad dates she goes on, she just retains this kind of infectious optimism that there's something out there for her, and there's good guys out there somewhere. And we don't see Honora's story before this movie starts off. We don't know like what she's been through in years and
I
years
kind
of
of
being a
like that
dancer.
though.
I do
I,
too, but I assume that she's probably been with some other pretty shitty guys along the way in her line of
oh
work
yeah,
whatsoever. And so it reminded me of Shirley MacLaine's story in Sweet Charity, and just how she keeps pushing because she believes that there's something out there.
yeah. I mean, and Mikey Madison's character is stubbornly remains optimistic even in
Yeah.
spite of it all. And I love that about her.
Absolutely. That is what makes the character so endearing, and a big part of what makes her performance so great. But what do you got next?
My next piece is another screwball of sorts from 1939, called Midnight by Mitchell Leisen, and screenplay co-written by Billy Wilder.
All right.
So Eve, played by Claudette Colbert, is a jobless showgirl roaming around Paris. She becomes friends with a Hungarian taxi driver named Tibor, played by Don Amici. Don Amici's character in this sort of reminds me of Yura Borisov's character in this, and so they drive from nightclub after nightclub to find a gig to pay for the transportation fare doubling, and there's no luck. Tibor pays for her dinner and invites her to spend the night at his place, and then, although Claudette Colbert is into Don Amici's character, she decides to flee. She sneaks into a fancy classical music concert and meets a rich woman named Madame Helene Flammarion, played by Mary Astor, alongside her millionaire gigolo Jacques, played by Francis Lederer. And then Eve pretends that she's a baroness. Funny enough, she takes Tibor's last name, Cizerny. Jacques takes a liking to Eve. Eve's husband, Georges, played by John Barrymore, assists Eve to split up Helene and Jacques. And then while this is going on, Tibor searches for Eve, and it's got a nasty biting edge wittiness from Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett's screenplay. And not only is this a great rom-com from that time period, but it's also a great absurdist Eat the Rich satire like Anora. And then somebody on Letterboxd described Midnight as dirtbag Cinderella, kind of like Anora.
Yeah, I have not seen Midnight, but I have heard that description of it, and that fits so well with exactly what Anora is when you break it down to its core. So I think that's great.
So the film touches on old money versus new money, Midnight, that is. And then Claudette Colbert and Don Amici are adorable. And what's great about Don Amici's performance is that it's a mix of goofy and classy. And it doesn't get talked about enough when it comes to the canon of screwballs. Midnight, that is.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to watch it. I've liked every Billy Wilder movie I've seen so far, and I have not seen it. But we love the Eat the Rich movies, and we love these kinds of rom-coms. Well, yeah, I'm gonna kind of do a pair of pieces because they're both A24 films, so I'm gonna kind of put them together. I thought of Zola and also American Honey. Zola is an obvious comparison.
I've seen American Honey, but I haven't seen Zola.
Okay. Yeah, I think Zola is the more obvious comparison with the, being centered around sex workers. But with both that and American Honey, you're getting kind of these, looks into very specific subcultures of like young Americans and, what people go
and
through.
And the false promise of being like an influencer.
Absolutely. And it's the idea of the American dream just being reduced to this is something I think is pretty heavy in Anora. It's heavy in Zola. It's heavy in American Honey. I think all three movies go together really well, all with great young casts that really kind of showcase the new people who are we're going to be seeing in movies for the next 10-20 years.
Yep. And then my next piece is another screwball from 1932. Well, it's like a pre-code, I guess, sort of screwball. A pre-code film called Jewel Robbery, directed by William Dieterle. I could be pronouncing his name wrong. So, set in Vienna, Austria, a baroness, Terry von Hohenfels, played by Kay Francis, is unhappily married to her inattentive rich husband, played by Henry Kolker. She's had a string of love affairs on the side, and then one day the Baroness goes into an exquisitely fancy jewel shop where her husband and cabinet minister lover Paul are. The Baron is about to gift her a 28-carat ring, and a jewel thief, William Powell, enters the picture with his gang, and they pull a heist at the store. Terry's husband and lover are locked in a vault, and he makes the store manager smoke a marijuana joint. And Terry asks the thief to free her under the condition that he takes her ring. And then romance sparks between William Powell and Kay Francis' characters. This film is perfect for a pre-code starter pack and also a screwball starter pack. And both this and Anora have like a whole motif around a ring.
Sure. Absolutely.
I love at the end when Igor hands Anora the ring back. It's like he sees to her that the ring wasn't just about like being married. It was like a symbol of status. Like she felt fancy, you
Sure. And
know?
like all this was for something. Like there was like some point to any of this, And so yeah, it was definitely a lot more than just being married to that piece of shit. So
Oh,
yeah.
totally. I know. He and what an asshole. Like when he ditches her, goes to the club.
Yeah.
It's funny how I you like that that letterbox joke list I sent. Hot girl chooses unconventionally handsome nice guy over charismatic
Yeah.
asshole. Poor things in
Absolutely.
Anora.
Yeah, these two movies go together quite well, I feel like. But yeah. I'm going to go so I should just say right up front, like there was a big part of the excitement of Anora that it was partially filmed here in Las Vegas, and ultimately that didn't end up being a lot of the movie. It's really only like 5-10 minutes of it, but it is a pretty like major sequence though, because it is where the wedding goes down. It's where a lot of partying goes down, and when you think of Las Vegas, you think of a place where all that kind of shit does happen. And so I had to throw The Hangover on my list because it's
Sure.
it's the place where anything happens, anything that can happen happens, and yeah.
And also the come down of a crazy
Yep,
night.
absolutely. And where did everything happen? It happened in Vegas. And so yeah, I had to throw it on the list there. And I would have preferred an entire movie from a filmmaker that's as exciting as Sean Baker shot here in Las Vegas. We haven't really seen that yet, but hopefully one of these days. Yeah.
One day. But my next piece is um funny enough. I'm going to talk about a movie that Sean Baker actually has seen.
Mm.
Because I discovered it on his letterbox. Funny enough, this movie won the Palme d'Or in 1965, back when it was still called the Grand Prix, I believe.
Hmm.
And it's called The Knack and How to Get It, directed by Richard uh, Richard Lester of Hard Day's Night fame.
Hmm.
So the story follows a dorky school teacher named Colin, played by Michael Crawford. One day when dragging a brass bed into his apartment through the help of his roommate, Colin meets Nancy, played by Rita Tushingham, and he's immediately romantically gobsmacked by her. And Colin is limited in sexual experience, and he wants to achieve, quote, the knack, a way of successfully seducing women. Colin and Nancy end up forming a true connection. There's sexual tension, but Colin values Nancy for who she is and not just as a sex object. Colin seeks guidance from his womanizing buddy Tolan, played by Ray Brooks, and then Tolan tries to have Nancy for himself. Tolan's interactions with Nancy get into disturbing territory. And similar to how Igor is there for Honora, Colin is there for Nancy. The Knack and How to Get It, I'm sorry, does not deserve to have a 3.2 out of 5 average on Letterboxd. I'm sorry. I understand
Mm.
why some modern viewers, if you will, may be put off by some of the touchy content it focuses on, especially in the second half. But I do think for the time period, I'd say it was done pretty tastefully. And Sean Baker actually wrote in his letterbox review the quote rape sequence is incredibly progressive thinking using humor to comment on gender roles, power play, consent, and manipulation.
Hmm. Yeah, I haven't seen it, but I've heard of its reputation, and like I don't know, it's weird. Honora, I think, does fit really well into these movies where it's kind of like it's out of step with the current moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I can see like hypothetically if Anora was made in like 2007,
Hmm.
like this honestly feels like it could have years later. I could see like some like super duper sensitive audiences maybe saying like, and it's already happening, saying it's quote not progressive enough,
Right, right.
and because like uh you know the we're not seeing a girl beat necessarily. I mean, a girl speaks her mind to a guy, but is not like beating one up,
Sure.
like, and essentially is being. It's like there's this notion among like modern internet feminism that like a guy saving a girl is bad
Right.
because it's like taking away her independence. But I mean, like, uh, if you're in a desperate situation, I mean, like, I'm not saying a girl can't be independent. I'm saying that, like, it's a faulty way of thinking. Because, like, logically, if you need help,
Yeah.
it's nothing wrong with receiving help, you know?
Absolutely, and it's not black and white. It's, there's so many gray areas to all of these issues, and it's just not as simple as good, bad, like the internet likes to try to make it all the time. And
Yeah,
by the way, she does beat up a guy. It just happens to be the nice guy.
that's true.
Yeah.
By beat up,
Yeah, I know.
I don't mean like she doesn't
Yeah.
um she doesn't like break the system is what I'm trying to say.
Yes, 100%. Yes, I
She doesn't destroy the system is what I'm trying to say.
yeah, for sure.
Destroying the system meaning like the rich get to move on and not and get away with what they
Yeah.
did.
Absolutely, yeah, and a lot of people on the internet just kinda can't watch a movie unless the good guy wins, like, it has to all kinda come together nicely.
But like the victory for I'd say that the victory for her and Igor is stepping away from that
Yeah, getting
life.
out of that cycle, you know? They kinda have a chance to go do something else, and, yeah, I completely
Yeah,
agree. I'll go with one last piece here, bringing it back to the A24 again. I'm gonna go with Uncut Gems, for
of
2
course.
for 2 reasons. Number 1, I mean, this is a very, anxious movie with a lot of bad situations progressively getting worse and worse, and nobody either on either side is able to calm things down. They just keep getting, more out of hand. But also Mikey Madison's accent, we gotta give it up to Julia Fox and, her insane, version of I don't even know what you'd call it, some kinda New York accent, but, it's a lot, and it's a choice, and it's great in both cases.
Also, Mark Edelstein's character Ivan is basically a mini Howard Ratner.
Sure, yeah. I could see that for sure too. So, yeah, that's
All
my
right.
last piece. Do you have any more that you wanted to bring up?
I have 3 more.
Okay.
All right, first one, we're talking about city nightlife. I'm talking about Ron Howard's debut feature Night Shift from
Okay.
1982. Chuck Lumley, played by Henry Winkler, is a timidly awkward man. He quits his stockbroker job and he gets a job at a morgue alongside the eccentric Bill Blazejowski, if I'm pronouncing the character's name correctly, played by Michael Keaton. He has a knack for scheming. Chuck's sex worker neighbor, Belinda, played by Shelley Long, is in need of a professional outlet. So the morgue becomes a brothel, and this movie's a blast.
Yeah, I somebody was just talking to me about that movie just the other day. I've never
Oh,
seen
and
it.
uh, by the way, back. I love in Anora when she bites, and they're
Yeah.
like, "She bites,"
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
and then for a more quieter film, like because I think that the quieter moments in Anora are being underrated. I mean, yes, it sure is loud and chaotic,
Mhm.
but there's also like moments of tenderness, like with uh, Nora and Igor's characters, and that made me think of this movie from 2007 called Quiet City, written and directed by Aaron Katz. So Jamie, played by Aaron Fisher, and Charlie, played by Chris Lanknow, um, they meet on the subway. Sadly, neither actor has done anything since then. Um, I don't think. And they immediately form a connection and spend the next 24 hours together. This was a part of the trend of quote mumblecore films, but what makes this stand out from other films in that realm to me is that it's not trying too hard to be mundanely realistic. It's more concerned about depicting the sweet relationship and a city adventure between our protagonists. It's not available to stream, but I rented a DVD. And yeah, and um, I think the quieter moments in Anora balanced with the loud moments are what help elevate it to another level.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, all of the, craziness wouldn't work if there wasn't something more there to the movie, and, definitely the quiet moments definitely help bring the whole thing together into, like, more of a rich story.
Yeah, and a film that I was considering putting on here, but I decided not to. was City Life, because I figured it would be a little too obvious, was After Hours.
Hmm. I heard a lot of people making the After Hours and obviously Pretty Woman,
Yeah.
comparisons. So I think
Oh,
both
and
could fit
another
well.
film. Actually, one of Sean Baker's earlier films. It's really, really underrated film of his called The Prince of Broadway.
I've never seen it. Yeah, I think I saw
That's
you
a
mention
really
it.
good. That's one of my favorite films of his.
Yeah, I've got to go back and
Um,
see that. I always thought Tangerine was his debut, and I didn't realize that.
no,
Yeah,
uh, I believe he had another film before Prince of Broadway, but Prince of Broadway is really, really good.
right
But
on.
my last piece, this is more of a joke piece.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about exotic dancers and crime games, I gotta mention Tango and Cash, 1989.
Hell yeah.
It, so Ray Tango, played by Sylvester Stallone, and Gabe Cash, played by Kurt Russell, are policemen specialized in narcotics. They have a goal of busting a drug lord named Yipure, played by I forget his name really is, played by Jack Palance. And then Jack Palance frames a titular duo for the murder of an FBI agent, and then Stallone and Russell's characters are brought to prison, and they have got to come up with the ultimate escape plan and take down Jack Palance's character once and for all, with the assistance from Tango's sister Catherine, played by Terry Hatcher, who's an exotic dancer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that is a fun one. And it's funny too, kind of taking it back to that conversation we were having about like people's, point of view on like all the sex stuff in these movies nowadays. Like it's just a different world now. And the kind of movies that get made now, like Anora versus Tango and Cash.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a fun one to close it out with. So
Yeah, it was such a pleasure sharing these puzzle pieces.
yeah, absolutely. I think we got into a lot of great stuff here. Is there any closing thoughts? Anything we didn't quite get into that you wanted to mention?
Um, I wanted to say that I really love the use of color in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
like the red scarf and the like the orangey red scarf and the like the blues and the purples.
That's always been, I feel like, a big strong suit for Sean Baker, as somebody who really, really uses color to its advantage in all the films that I've seen from him.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see Mikey Madison's career rise from here. And you're a Borisov
Oh,
too, and Mark
absolutely.
Eydelshteyn.
Sure. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I really like Karen Karalugian, who's in all of Sean Baker's films. He's really good in The Prince of Broadway too.
Oh, right on. Right on. Cool, cool. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap up Anora. Josie, is there another movie you watched recently you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yes. In fact, last night I watched from 1994 for like the Thanksgiving holiday and the upcoming holidays Nobody's Fool starring Paul Newman.
Okay.
Really good movie, directed by Robert Benton. It also has Jessica Tandy, Bruce Willis, Melanie Griffith. It has a young Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Right on. Yeah, I'm sure I saw that back in the day, back when it came out in the 90s, but I haven't seen it since back then. Maybe that'll get a rewatch one of these days too. But
Yeah.
right on. Well, Josie, where can people find you and everything you're up to?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at Josie Poetess. You can look me up, Josie DeMarco on Letterboxd, and I have Positive Poems on Instagram. And I have a YouTube channel, Josephine DeMarco. I have not done a video in a while, but taking a little break though, but I'll be back soon.
Right on.
Thank you so much for having me on. Happy Thanksgiving
Absolutely. Happy
or
all of the
early
holidays.
holidays.
Yeah,
As far, I mean,
yeah. We've got a whole busy string of holidays to look forward to. So yeah, thank you again as always
thank
for doing this
you.
show, and we'll get you back again sometime.
Great.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation about Anora. Thank you to Josie DeMarco for joining me on that one, and thank you to all of you for listening. If you're enjoying piecing it together, make sure you are subscribed so you'll find out about all the new episodes as they come out. Also, if you have any puzzle pieces for us, anything that we didn't mention during the conversation, I'd love to hear them. I will read them on the next trailers episode, and I just love hearing from the listeners in general. So get in touch. You could do that on social media at Piecing Pod. You could join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about all the movies we talk about here on the show. And you could also just contact me at our website, piecingpod.com. You could also sign up for the mailing list while you're there. Check out our Patreon, the Produced by David Rosen Patreon, where I post bonus and advanced content from Piecing It Together, Awesome Movie Year, and from my music career. And you can do that over at patreon.com/bydavidrosen. And with that said, we're going to close this out with a piece of music like I always do. And I'm thinking what would be a good fit for a movie. I got to do something, energetic for the world of Anora. I'm going to go with a track called How to Start a Fire. This was from my most recent full-length album, More Content. I'm currently working on another compilation album that'll come out in early 2025, and then my next full-length album, which I'm super excited to share with everybody. So lots more music coming soon. But for now, this is from my latest full-length album, and I hope you enjoy it, and we'll be back with more Piecing It Together real soon.
an All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.